The cold felt alive. It crawled beneath her skin, settled into her bones, and refused to let go. 6 days she had been in the dungeon, and in all that time, the cold was the only thing that never abandoned her. Almost the only thing. There was also the wolf. No ordinary dog. A beast the size of a small pony, its fur like thunderclouds, its eyes gleaming amber. It belonged to the Alpha King. They said it was more than an animal, a shadow, an extension of his will. For 6 days it had sat motionless before the bars of her cell, watching her. The guards kept their distance. They shoved her food, watery broth and stale bread, through the bars from the far end of the corridor, muttering that the wolf was Fen, the king's ghost. As long as the beast was here, the king himself was watching, and that meant only one thing. Her death was decided, and it would not be swift. She didn't need the wolf to tell her that. The brand on her shoulder blade already had. A serpent, burned deep into her skin. The mark of a traitor. She could still smell her own burning flesh in her sleep. She was innocent. The thought was fragile, a flickering flame in a storm. It didn't warm her, but it didn't go out. She had not poisoned Lady Amelia. She had been used. Graf Albrecht von Falkenhayn, the king's most trusted advisor, a man with a calm voice and eyes that inspired confidence, had pressed the small vial into her hands. A mild sedative for the nervous Luna candidate, he had said. She had believed him. A simple girl from a remote village had no reason to doubt him. When Lady Amelia collapsed, gasping, her skin turning blue, Falkenhayn had been the first to react, the first to point. Traitor. His voice had pierced the hall. He had seized her sleeve, yanked it up, and revealed the empty vial still clutched in her hand. Since then, she had waited for the verdict, for the end. On the 7th day, heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. Not the tired shuffling of guards. These were deliberate, weighted, carrying the certainty of command. Even Fen reacted. For the first time in days, the wolf lifted its head, ears pricked toward the sound, a deep rumble rolling through its chest. Her heart hammered. He had come. The Alpha King stepped out of the darkness. He was overwhelming, taller than any story had suggested, broad-shouldered, a presence that filled the narrow passage completely. No crown, only plain, dark leather. His hair was deep black, threaded with silver that caught the torchlight, but it was his face that stopped her breath. Hard, severe, every line carved from uncompromising stone. His eyes were pale silver, cold as frozen water under moonlight. In them lay something timeless, something that seemed to draw warmth from everything around him. He stopped directly before her cell. Falkenhayn stood at his side, his face arranged into practiced concern. "Your Majesty," Falkenhayn murmured, "she has already broken under guilt. It would almost be merciful to spare her the waiting." The king did not look at him. His gaze rested solely on her, huddled on the floor, too exhausted to stand, too frightened to try. He studied her in silence. The matted hair, the hollow cheeks, the shaking. "She doesn't smell of guilt," he said. His voice was deep, quiet, yet it resonated like distant thunder. Falkenhayn blinked. "Majesty, she smells of fear." "Yes," the king continued as if he hadn't heard. "Fear, and something else, something old." He crouched down before the bars until his face was level with hers. The nearness struck her like a wave. He smelled of pine forest and clear winter air, something pure, cold, and yet entirely his own. "Show me the brand." Not a request. Her body wouldn't obey. Fear held her frozen. Now. The word was quiet but sharp as a blade. Slowly, her trembling fingers pulled aside the collar of her tunic. The serpent mark burned against her pale skin. Red, violet, raw. Still weeping. His silver eyes narrowed slightly. His face remained unreadable. "Who gave the order?" he asked. Her gaze involuntarily jumped to Falkenhayn. standing calm and composed behind the king. Her throat closed. Speaking his name was more than a risk, or it was a sentence. The king noticed the glance. He did not turn around. This brand was done carelessly, he said quietly, eyes returning to her shoulder. Driven by rage, not the work of a royal executioner. This was done in secret, by someone who follows no rules. He held her gaze. It was not done on my command. Hope flared inside her, sharp and almost painful. Open it, the king said. The chief guard fumbled with the keys with shaking hands. The door swung open with a metallic groan. She pressed herself against the back wall, breathless. She will be taken to the West Wing, the king announced, his voice carrying through the corridor with absolute clarity. She will be washed, fed, and placed under my personal supervision. Falkenhayn stiffened. Majesty, this is unwise. The girl is a convicted traitor. Bringing her into the royal... I was speaking to the guard. The king's voice dropped to something quiet and lethal. Not my advisor. Anyone who contradicts my orders is welcome to reconsider them in my dungeons. This cell appears to be free. Falkenhayn pressed his lips together. Then he bowed. As you command, my king. The king turned back to her. Stand up. She tried. Her legs refused, too long in the cold, too long held by fear. She trembled and sank back to the floor. Before any guard could reach her, the king moved, soundless, swift, with the fluid precision of a predator. 2 steps, then he bent, slid one arm beneath her back, one under her knees, and lifted her effortlessly. A murmur rippled through the guards. Her cheek pressed against the cool leather of his chest. Beneath it she felt hard muscle, unyielding and strong, and beneath that his heartbeat. Steady, calm. It was frightening, and somehow strangely safe. His body was cold, but not like the dungeon's cold. This was clear, pure, like ancient ice. Fen rose and followed them without a sound, a great shadow at their heels, amber eyes missing nothing. The West Wing was another world. A soft bed, heavy furs, a fireplace crackling with birchwood, a wide window overlooking snow-covered gardens. Servants came in silence, prepared a hot herbal bath that drew the pain from her muscles, washed the dungeon from her skin, untangled her hair. They brought warm stew, fresh bread, wine. She ate slowly. Her stomach resisted before it surrendered. She was clean, warm, fed, and she had never felt such fear. This kindness was more dangerous than the cell, and it felt like a golden cage, and she didn't know why she was inside it. On the second day, the king returned. Without knocking, he carried several old leather-bound books and dropped them on a large, dust-covered desk in the corner. This wing has been sealed for 100 years, he said, not looking at her. The library is in disorder. You will organize it. She stared at him. My king? He turned his silver eyes on her. You can read, can't you? The records from your village note the priest taught you. Yes, your majesty. Good. A single word. Organize everything by title, author, year. I want a complete inventory. She was not a guest. She was a prisoner with a task. And strangely, this gave her relief. Structure was something to hold on to. Fen never left her side. He followed her between the shelves like a shadow, claws clicking softly. One afternoon he laid his massive head in her lap while she sat reading. She froze, but nothing happened. His amber eyes were calm, almost gentle. Cautiously she began to stroke his thick fur, and it was soothing, almost as though she were touching something connected to the king himself. The king came every evening. He stood by the fire and watched her work. He rarely spoke, but his presence changed the room. Something heavy settled into the air, a pressure at the back of her neck. She felt his gaze on her, relentless and watchful. With time, she began to notice more. The exhaustion that crept into his face when he thought himself unobserved. The way his left hand would sometimes curl into a fist, fighting something sudden and private. And beneath it all, a loneliness so deep it was almost visible. He was beautiful the way a glacier is beautiful, immense, ancient, shaped by pressure and cold. One evening she was shivering without realizing it. The fire had burned low, and a draft crept through a gap in the window frame. She had been too absorbed in a fragile manuscript to notice. He said nothing. He simply went to the chest at the foot of her bed, opened it, and drew out a heavy fur-lined cloak. He crossed to her and draped it over her shoulders without a word. It was warm. It smelled of pine and snow and him. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. His silver eyes rested on her a moment longer than usual. Then he left. She pulled the cloak tighter. It was only a practical gesture. He didn't want his prisoner falling ill, and yet it felt different, like a hairline crack in ice. One evening she found it, tucked behind a row of dry legal texts, a slim, dark blue volume, a collection of epic poems from the Sunstones, a distant place in the south. Only 3 copies had ever existed. The other 2 had burned. She left it open on the desk. When the king entered and saw it, he stopped. He approached slowly, laid his hand on the open page, a touch that was unexpectedly careful. "Where did you find this?" "It was hidden," she said, "behind tax records from the 3rd century. He looked at her, and for a moment something else lived in his eyes. Not frost. Something warmer. "My grandfather spent his entire life searching for this," he said quietly. "He believed it was a legend. It isn't. No." His gaze returned to the book. "It isn't." He closed it with great care. "You did well." The words were soft, almost offhand, and yet they warmed her more than the fire. From that evening on, he stayed longer, pulling a chair closer to the hearth. Sometimes he read. Sometimes he simply sat and watched the flames. The silence between them changed. It was no longer empty, no longer filled with fear. It became a shared space, carried by the rustle of pages and the quiet crackle of the fire. One evening he broke it. "Tell me about the brand." Her hand went still. She looked at him. He stood in the flickering light, face half in shadow. "Tell me your version," he said simply. No command, no threat. So she did. She told him everything. Falkenhayn's false kindness, the vial pressed into her hands, the moment in the great hall when everything collapsed around her, the accusations, the locked room, the smell of burning flesh. Her voice stayed even. The pain had gone too deep for tears. When she finished, silence settled heavy over them. "Falkenhayn has served my family for 200 years, he said at last. His line has always been loyal. The small hope in her cracked. Of course, he believed him, not her. "I understand," she murmured, turning back to her work. Her eyes burned. "I didn't say I don't believe you." She went still. "I said his line has always been loyal. Past loyalty doesn't guarantee future fidelity." He stood, then moved behind her, close enough that she felt the cold of his presence. The word of a powerful man against a girl with no name. A pause. His fingers touched her shoulder, tracing the shape of the hidden brand through the cloth. She flinched. His touch was light, almost careful. "Oh, does it hurt?" "Only when I breathe." The words came before she could stop them. A silence. "Continue," he said finally. Distant again. Cool. Then he left. She remained with Fen, with the fire, and with the memory of his touch. Something had shifted. The line between them was no longer clear. She could feel it. And it frightened her as much as it drew her in. She began to notice the episodes. In the middle of their quiet evenings, he would suddenly flinch, his hand going to his chest, a fine tremor running through him. A breath of frost would appear on his skin, delicate, almost invisible, then vanish. He tried to hide it, turning away, gripping the arm of his chair until his knuckles whitened. But she saw it. The pain in his eyes, the strain in his face. What was happening to him? Then she heard Falkenhayn's voice in the corridor. "A mistake, Majesty. This girl is a stain on the court. The council is alarmed. Your illness. My health is no concern of the council. The king's voice broke like ice, and certainly not yours. The old writings warn of this. Falkenhayn's tone became careful. The curse of your bloodline stirs, and it only manifests in the presence of a true companion. Your bloodline is denied love. When you begin to feel it, your heart begins to freeze. It leads inevitably to death. This girl is the trigger. She is the poison. You must remove her before it is too late. Silence, heavy, crushing. She stood behind the door, a hand pressed to her mouth. A curse. Love meant his death, and Falkenhayn was using the king's suffering against her. Later that night he did not come, or the next. The silence in the room turned hollow. Even Fen grew restless, is pacing before the door. She was the poison. Falkenhayn was right. These feelings that had crept into her, this quiet, forbidden hope. She was destroying him. The thought hurt more than anything had before. On the third night he returned. He looked changed, older. The silver in his hair more pronounced, his face paler. And the cold was stronger than ever. He didn't look at her. He went straight to the fire and stared into the flames. You have to send me away. Her voice shook. I heard you. I heard you and Falkenhayn. The curse. Her hands trembled. I make you sick. Send me away. Or do whatever is necessary. But I cannot stay. He looked at her, something moving in his gaze, fury, pain, and something she didn't dare name. Do you truly believe I let Falkenhayn dictate my actions? He said sharply. Do you truly believe I'm ruled by old legends? It isn't a legend. She stepped toward him. I see it. The pain. The frost. If I am the cause, then you have to let me go. And where would you go? The answer came immediately, hard. Back to the dungeon? To the scaffold Falkenhayn has already prepared. He would not let you live a single day. That would be better, she whispered, than watching you slowly die. The words hung between them, raw, inescapable. He took a step toward her, slightly unsteady. His face was tight with pain. You don't understand what you're saying. I know only one thing, she said, and tears finally blurred her vision. You saved me. I will not be your ending. He reached her. His hands came to rest on her shoulders. Ice. A piercing, absolute cold that stole her breath. His body shook, visible, she uncontrolled. Fine crystals of frost formed on his clothing. Mira. For the first time he spoke her name. Soft. Fragile. Then something broke in him. A strangled sound of pain. His grip loosened. His legs gave way, and he collapsed to the floor, body convulsing, frost spreading across his skin, his hair, his clothes, until in seconds he was encased in white ice. Carlin! She fell to her knees beside him. Fen was there instantly, a soul-rending howl tearing from him, raw with grief. The door flew open, guards, and at their head, Falkenhayn. His face was hard, his eyes held triumph. Seize her, he pointed. Do you see it? The witch has done her work. She has killed the king. Chaos erupted. 2 guards seized her arms like iron clamps and hauled her up. Fen launched himself at them with a growl that went through bone. 2 men went down. The others froze, swords half drawn, fear stronger than obedience. Fen placed himself before her, between her and every one of them, a living shield. Falkenhayn's face twisted with fury. Kill the beast, then take her. But she barely heard him. Her world had narrowed to a single point. Carlin, the man who had seen her, the man who had believed her, the man who now lay motionless before her. Something in her broke, not quietly, with force, grief, fury, and a love she could no longer deny. No, she would not let him die. She would not let Falkenhayn win. She pulled free and crawled back to Carlin's still form. The cold radiating from him was barely survivable, burning her skin from a distance. No healer could get close. No human could. Only her. And she extended her trembling hands, hovering above the ice that covered his chest, directly over where his heart lay. Then she pressed her palms against it. Pain, immediate, savage, it shot up her arms and drove the air from her lungs. For a moment she thought her own heart would stop. She did not let go. She pushed inward. Every thread of will she had, every fragment of desperation, every spark of what she felt for him. She thought of warmth, the fireplace, the sun she hadn't felt in so long, the stubborn flame inside herself that even the dungeon hadn't extinguished. Under her hands, something flickered. A tiny golden spark. More. The spark grew, swelled into a quiet glow. Not fire. Warmth. Life, like the first ray of sun touching frozen water. Her shoulder blade ignited. The brand. A pain so intense, it was as though the burning iron had found her again. She screamed, but her hands stayed. The serpent mark began to glow, brighter, fiercer, until the dark lines dissolved into golden light. Something in her split open. A force that had been suppressed broke free. A torrent of light poured through her hands, into him. Not destruction. Warmth. Pure. Alive. The room flooded with golden radiance. Guards covered their eyes and fell back. The ice on Carlin's body reacted instantly, hissing, crackling, but not melting. It dissolved, became mist. The frost receded from his skin, from his hair. Color returned, and then, faintly, a heartbeat. The first fragile beat beneath her hands. She poured everything into it. Her body shook with the effort. Sweat ran down her face, though the air was still cold. The heartbeat grew stronger, steadier. And then, with a deep, shuddering breath, Carlin's eyes opened. Not the rigid, frozen silver anymore. Living, moving, liquid metal full of force. His gaze found her instantly, her hands on his chest, the fading light, her face marked by exhaustion and tears. Mira. His voice was barely a breath. The golden light went out. Her strength abandoned her. Dizziness took her. But before she could fall, he pulled her to him, his arms closing around her. Strong, certain. She sank against his chest, his heart. Strong. Warm. For the first time, he was not cold. "It was you," he said quietly. "All along, it was you." He drew back just enough to look at her. His fingers, no longer icy, only cool, touched her shoulder where the brand had been. Nothing remained, only a trace of warmth. "They made you a traitor," he said. His voice was steady now, carrying. His gaze moved past her to Falkenhayn. "And yet, you are my heart." He rose and brought her up with him, one arm wrapped firmly around her, holding her close. He did not release her. "Falkenhayn." His voice rolled through the room like distant thunder. "You betrayed my companion. You used the curse of my bloodline to destroy me. You branded an innocent woman." A pause, cold and absolute. "I believe a cell has recently become available." Falkenhayn crumpled to his knees. "Majesty, I was mistaken. A misunderstanding. I only wanted to protect you. My protection stands here." The king's arm drew her closer. His eyes moved to the guards. "Take him!" They did not hesitate. The door closed. Silence returned. Only the fire crackling softly. He turned to her then, and his hands framing her face, his thumbs moving across her cheeks. Something in her went quiet. The fear dissolved. In its place came something deeper. Something right. "You are not poison," he said softly. "You are the opposite. The curse was never in love. It was in love's absence. It needed balance. It needed warmth." She looked at him. "I thought I would kill you. You saved me." He leaned in, his lips met hers. The kiss was warm, not merely warm, but alive, like embers in a forge, like the first fire lit in a house that had stood empty too long, like a beginning. 3 months later, the castle was a different place. The cold that had lived in its walls was gone. Even the shadows in the long corridors seemed less deep. A new emblem hung in the great hall. A silver wolf surrounded by golden flames, a sign for what had become. Wagmira stood on the balcony, looking out over the gardens. Snow was slowly retreating. Pale green shoots pressed up through the earth, cautious, unstoppable. Spring was coming back, arms wrapped around her from behind. Carlin drew her gently against him, his chin resting lightly on her head. No more biting cold, only a pleasant coolness balanced by her warmth. His curse had not vanished, but it had lost its power. Together, it was nothing more than a shadow. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She smiled softly. "Your wolf. When he sat before my cell, I thought he was my warden. My end." "He was," Carlin said quietly. His arms tightened slightly. "He was guarding my death." She frowned. He continued. "When my men found you, I knew something was different. Faint, barely perceptible. But there. A connection." His voice grew serious. Falkenhayn saw it. For him, it was an opportunity. He brought you here, hoping I would have you removed, and with you, everything that existed between us. He turned her gently to face him, meeting her eyes. "But I couldn't. I couldn't sign your sentence. I couldn't stay away." His fingers traced her cheek. "So I sent Fen." A small smile. "As long as he was with you, no one could touch you. He wasn't guarding a prisoner." A pause, full of weight. "He was guarding my future." The words landed deep in her chest. "I was afraid," she said quietly. He nodded. "So was I." He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. 500 years I was alone. I believed love was my death. I didn't know it would be my salvation. She laced her fingers through his. We built it together. For a moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, see carefully, a smile crossed his face. Rare, unfamiliar, but real. "Yes," he said. "We did." At their feet, Fen raised his head, pressed it against Carlin's boot, and let out a low, contented sound. Mira leaned into him, her head against his chest, listening. His heart. Strong. Steady. Alive. The girl from the dungeon was gone. What remained was something new. Something stronger. The Winter King no longer existed as he once had. The cold had found its place. What remained was a king and his queen, a wolf and a flame, bound not by a curse but by a choice. They had found each other in the dark, and together they had reached the morning.